Capitulum XXVII, Res Rusticae, Lecture 4, versus Septuagesimus usque ad versum 91. Agri Julii non ad domino ipso coluntur, sed a colonis. Julius's fields are not cultivated by the master himself, ipso, but by tenant farmers, we might say. Sharecroppers, I suppose, in a way. Farmers who work another's land is essentially the idea with colonus, coloni. Colonus est agricola, qui non suos, sed alienos agros, pro domino absenti colet, et mercedem domino solvit, pro frugibus agrorum. So what is a colonus anyway? Well, a colonus is a farmer who cultivates not his own, non suos, not his own fields, but another's fields, or the fields of other people, alienos agros. Recall that the adjective alienus is used generally instead of the genitive of alterum, of another, or rather than the genitive of alius, alia, aliud, altera, alterum of the other, alius, alia, aliud of an other. So, who cultivates not his own, but other folks, alienos, fields, on behalf of, pro, a preposition, plus the ablative case, on behalf of an absent master. And what does he do? He pays a fee, a price, mercedem, to the master. Earlier we saw merces, mercedes as a kind of wage or stipend for the magister, Diodorus. But here using the same word, wage, wouldn't work well in English at all. So maybe pays a fee of some kind. He pays a fee, solvere mercedem, to the dative, domino. On behalf of what, or for what? Well, for the fruits, for the produces of the fields. In the plural in Latin, but a collective idea, for the produce of the fields. Coloni Julii sunt agricolae validi, qui industriae laborant, omnesque mercedem ad diem solvere solent. Julius's tenant farmers are strong farmers. Recall agricola, agricolae, first declension in form, but masculine in gender, are strong farmers who work hard, industriae, adverb. They work industriously. And all of them, omnes, and all, solent, are accustomed to pay, solvere, the fee, mercedem, ad diem, on time, ad diem, on the day, at the day. That is, at the fixed day, on time. Ad hoc anno, quidam colonus mercedem nondum solvit. But, ablative of time when, this year, in this year, a certain will be the word to reach for with quidam. A certain, one of them, I don't know his name, or I'm not going to mention his name, a certain tenant farmer, not quidem, em, but quidam, quaedam, quodam. A certain tenant farmer has not yet, nondum, has not yet paid, perfect tense probably, has not yet paid the wage, the fee. Iulius eum colonum in agro conspicit, et huc accede colone inquit. Julius catches sight of that tenant farmer, eum colonum, like saying illum colonum, in the field, and says, "Come hither, O tenant farmer." Huc, to hear, and the imperative, accede, shorty family verb, third conjugation verb, come here, move over here, he says. Dominus imperat, ut colonus accedat, tum interrogat. Let's pause for a moment before we go on to what Julius says to consider this momentous, earth-shaking sentence that we've just seen, because this is the first of many of its type that we'll see. And really it's the preoccupation of the third semester of study in Latin, at least at Ave Maria, to wrestle with, to come to grips with the subjunctive mood and its various uses. And that verb accedat is in the subjunctive mood. You'll note that the indicative mood, third person singular active voice, is accedit. And in the subjunctive there is a vowel shift, a slight vowel shift in the ending that marks that we're looking at the subjunctive. So if you look in your book on page 219 in the Grammatica Latina section, Ørberg has laid out there in the active voice, in the passive voice, for all four families of verbs. Also be sure to note he has there the present subjunctive of the verb to be, sim, sis, sit, simus, situs, sint. So he has all that laid out there for you as far as the morphology goes. And certainly for the quiz over chapter 27, I want you to be sure to study that morphology and be able to reproduce it for any of those verbs in any voice. But what's happened here? Well, I think, first of all, what Ørberg has done and given you in the margin is a very simple, easy introduction. Until Ørberg was ready to introduce you to the subjunctive mood, in Latin it's styled the modus conjunctivus, the mode of conjoining, putting together two sentences. That is a main sentence, Dominus imperat, and a dependent sentence or clause that is the bit following the ut colonus accedat. What he's done is, in sentences of this type, before now, he's used the verb iubere, because iubere, to give a command, to give an order, is a verb that irregularly, actually, takes an accusative with infinitive construction. So you see what Ørberg has given in the margin there. The first line here on the slide is the equivalent of saying, Dominus colonum accedere iubet. The master orders that the tenant farmer approach. What has happened now? Notice on the slide, in the text that we're considering now, with the subjunctive, colonus is in the nominative case. And accedat is not the infinitive, but a finite form of the verb, indeed the third person singular. What's happened is that ut now, previously like or as, but here's something different, something completely different altogether. That is the best word, T-H-A-T, to use in English if we have to use a particular word for it at all. The master commands that the tenant farmer approach. The ut is kind of the glue that holds these two clauses together. the one dependent that is hanging upon the other one, upon the main sentence, upon the Dominus imperat sentence. When do we use this subjunctive? That's the other thing to note at the outset. Well, there are a multitude of uses for the subjunctive, and as I said, the primary work of this semester is taking up the challenge of at least seeing them all and thinking about them all to some extent. In this chapter, the subjunctive is restricted to what we can call verba studii et voluntatis. That is, verbs that express studium, eagerness, zeal, wanting something, and voluntas, will or desire. And you can see how imperare falls into that category. Gildersleeve and Lodge put it in these terms. They say, with verbs of willing, wishing, warning, beseeching, urging and demanding, resolving and endeavoring, the subjunctive is used in this way as we see here. So also with any verb or phrase used as a verb of willing or demanding. So it's possible to extend the construction beyond just a particular family of verbs that are obviously of that type of the verba studii et voluntatis. Newman, in her introduction to chapter 27, labels these verba postulandi et curandi. And we'll see later why in particular curandi, because the verb curare, to see to it that, to take care that this other thing happens, is one of the verbs or constructions that Ørberg uses frequently. So that's just another, or we could say a subset of verba studii et voluntatis. Verba postulandi, that's a gerund in the genitive case, verbs of asking, et verba curandi, and verbs of taking care or seeing to it that, another gerund in the genitive case. So look over here, introduction, but this should be enough to get us started, and then please let's make sure that we're getting our questions answered about the subjunctive as it comes up, as it occurs. So as I go through here, I'll suggest a number of ways that we can translate this, a kind of too rigid way. The too rigid way to translate this is, the master orders that the tenant farmer approach. That's fine, but in general there's an easier way to do a sentence like that in English, and it's with something that we call a final infinitive. That is an infinitive that expresses purpose. We don't get to use that final infinitive in Latin, at least not in classical Latin. Instead we have constructions like this, ut with the subjunctive. But in English, the best thing to say here would be, the master commands the tenant farmer to approach. That would be the simplest, smoothest, easiest thing to say. So in general, we can't say that there is some one way to translate the subjunctive. Just like with the ablative, we'll start out thinking, I want to know how to do it. What's the key to do it? But we have to take in a few examples and get a feel for it, get a general feel for it. And then we'll begin to see some of the nuance or the variety there, just as we did with the ablative. So here in English we'll want to say, the master commands the tenant farmer to approach. Then he asks, Cur nondum solvisti mercedem? Why have you not yet paid the fee? Quam quaterve jam obste poposci. Interesting looking verb there. Some of the Greek reduplication in the perfect system of poscere, poposcise, which, quam, which I have asked 2 or 3 times, ter quaterve, already, of you, from you, obste, a spelling variation on obte. Octingentos sestertios mihi debes, solve eos. You owe to me, the dative, 800 sesterces. Pay them, solve eos. Iulius colonno imperat, ut mercedem solvat. Another sentence with the subjunctive. You see the verb here in the subjunctive is solvat. What would the indicative be? Solvit. So now that we have the subjunctive on the table, it's all the more important that we're carefully distinguishing between the 4 families of verbs. This was an issue when the future tense came on the table, and in the 3rd and the 4th families, a vowel shift marked the future tense. Well, a vowel shift marks the subjunctive mood in all 4 families of the Latin verbs. So very important that we know our verbs, that we know that the indicative is solvit, so we can see, solvat is the subjunctive. So Julius commands the dative as before, but he commands the dative not an infinitive, but a whole clause. He commands the dative to do that dependent clause. He commands the tenant farmer that he, solvat, that he pay the fee. So we can't, again, it's if we try to translate it too literally, we get all gunged up in English. He commands to the tenant farmer that he pay the fee. Doesn't sound too nice. Better here to say, Julius commands the tenant farmer to pay the fee. Colonus pallidus pre metu loqui non potest. The pale tenant farmer cannot speak on account of, because of, pre with the ablative, because of fear. 4th declension, metas, metus. Loqui, a deponent verb, and so that passive looking form there, the long I in the infinitive. Audisne, impero tibi ut mercedem solvas, quin respondes. We get to see now the same sentence that we saw a moment ago, but the main verb, impero, has switched to the 1st person, and now we see what that 2nd person singular subjunctive looks like. Not solvat here, but solvas. So very easy to follow the persons. It's recognizing that it's the subjunctive is the first step. Are you listening? I am commanding to you that you pay the wage. Again, better in English to say, I am commanding you to pay the fee. Sorry, not wage, the fee. Quin, the equivalent of cur non. Why do you not answer? Nulla est mihi pecunia. Dative of possession with mihi, dativus possessoris. I have no money. Literally, if you will, no money is to me. I have no money is the best way to do that. Ne asem quidem habeo. In idiom, or I guess that's the best way to think of ne and quidem working together. I have not even. So ne and quidem will go around the words that the not even idea applies to. I have not even an oz, not even a dime, we might say. Nisi hic et nunc solvis mercedem debitam, servis meis imperabo ut te agris meis pellant. Unless here And now, hic et nunc, you pay the ode, the perfect passive participle from the verb debere, debuisse, debitus aum, being used very much as an adjective. Unless you pay the ode fee, the fee owed, I will order. I will order. I will order. I'll give an order to the dative. I will order my slaves. The best way in English to handle this, with an final infinitive that is an infinitive expressing purpose, to drive you out of my fields. A couple things to note here. Note how the main verbs, or the controlling verbs that we had seen before this, before there are subjunctive clauses, they were present tense. Now imperabo is the future tense, but it's still followed by the present subjunctive. So the present subjunctive will come after both present tense verbs and future tense verbs. There is no future subjunctive. The subjunctive, as you can see, is already a sort of an open, somewhat futuristic idea. It might happen in the next millisecond, but it's not yet happening right now, at least in this sort of sentence. So I will order my slaves, literally, painfully, I will order to my slaves that they drive, that they push, pellant, you direct object, agris meis, ablative. Think of it as the ablative of separation, that they push you from my fields. And what happens here is that sometimes prepositions are omitted with verbs of abstaining, removing, relieving, and excluding. That's what's happened. That is what has happened here. And so Ørberg simply glosses this by saying, well, agris meis, here it's like saying ex agris meis. If you want to read more about that, you can see that at Gildersleben Lodge number 390, note 2, the bit about prepositions being admitted in some situations. Like this. Iam tres menses expecto. Already or now for 3 months, accusative of duration. I am waiting. I am waiting. So you see how expecto then is followed by ut ea pecunia mihi solvator. That's not really, expecto isn't really a verbum curandi et postulandi. Or maybe, I don't know, it's a little bit harder for me to see how it's like that. But it's certainly a verb of willing, or a verb of wishing. He's in expectation. He's been in expectation for this fee. I have been waiting for 3 months, painfully, literally, that money, ea pecunia, is paid to me. What would sound better in English? I have been waiting for 3 months for that money to be paid to me. Et si vir patien sum, hic finis est patientiae mea. Although I am a patient man, this is the end of my patience. Patiens, patientis, an adjective coming from the verb patior, to suffer, to bear up under. Third declension adjective. Hic, this, no macron over the I. This is the end of my patience.